Hi, I'm Ingrid, and this started with a glass of apple juice. My mom, well, my stepmom, handed it to me at dinner, all smiles and pearls, but something about it felt off. So I swapped it with my sister. She ended up in the ER. That moment, it cracked open a lifetime of gaslighting, hidden wills, and secrets that went deeper than I ever imagined. How do you fight back when your own family paints you as unstable? And what do you do when the person trying to erase you already erased someone else? I've walked into Geneva's house too many times to count. The place never changes. Neither does the way I feel when I'm inside it. It's too clean, like a magazine spread come to life, or maybe a museum exhibit called Southern Hospitality Staged. You could eat off the floor, but God help you if you speak too loudly. Geneva stands near the entrance, arms out, smiling like she's hosting a fundraiser, not a family dinner. Ingrid, so good to see you, sweetheart. Sweetheart. She only calls me that when something's off. The last time she said it, I found out she'd changed the locks on my father's storage unit before I could retrieve his personal effects. Said she didn't think I'd be interested in old papers. Just like that, 2 decades of his work gone, disappeared into thin air. I nod politely, step inside, and smooth the front of my dress. The air inside is cool, but it sticks to my skin like something unspoken. Geneva's home has a rhythm, and I've learned to walk in step with it. The same seating chart, the same tense smiles, the same sense that I'm in the picture, but slightly out of frame. Delaney's laugh carries from the dining room. My stepsister, Geneva's daughter from her first marriage, 3 years older than me and never missed a chance to remind me of it. She's the kind of woman who wears pearls to a backyard barbecue and somehow makes it look effortless. "I saved your seat," she says brightly when she spots me. "It's at the far end of the table. Always is. Just close enough to see everyone's faces, not quite close enough to interrupt. I sit. Fold my napkin. Listen." The room hums with small talk. Geneva floats from guest to guest, topping off glasses and correcting posture with gentle taps on shoulders. She moves toward me, holding a glass filled with something golden. "Apple juice," she says, placing it in front of me. "Thought it might help you settle in. Made it just for you." It's a simple gesture, but nothing Geneva does is simple. I look at the glass. It shimmers. Not the sparkle of condensation or ice. Something slick, almost oily, clings to the surface. And there's a scent. Faint, almost undetectable, but not right. "Thank you," I murmur, keeping my voice steady. She's already moved on. I glance at Delaney, who's at the bar, chatting up Uncle Ray. Her laugh is too loud, calculated like she wants the whole room to know how much fun she's having. I rise slowly, carrying the glass in one hand, and walk toward her. "Mind helping me with the place settings?" I ask. She rolls her eyes but follows me toward the sideboard where the extra utensils are. We're standing side by side now. I act like I'm adjusting a napkin, lean in and, without so much as a blink, swap the glasses. She doesn't notice. She never notices. Back at the table, Geneva catches my eye. She's watching, smiling but not with her mouth, with her teeth. And then it hits me. This isn't the first time. I remember being 17. Geneva had accused me of stealing pills from her medicine cabinet, said she found them in my purse, but I didn't take anything. I knew I didn't. Still, my father looked at me like he didn't know who I was. "You're just like your mother," Geneva had whispered while I cried in the laundry room. Fragile, always needing to be rescued. That night I promised myself I'd never let her twist me into someone I'm not again. Never let her plant shame inside me and call it truth. I sit down again and press my fingers against my thighs, grounding myself in the moment. The juice sits untouched in front of Delaney now. She picks it up without hesitation, takes a sip, and winces. "Tart," she says, shrugging. "Probably just fresh." My chest tightens. I glance at Geneva, who's already raising her wine glass, laughing with one of my father's former business partners like this is any other Sunday. But it's not. Something has shifted. I feel it. Not in a dramatic lightning strikes kind of way. More like the way you feel when the wind changes direction right before a storm. I don't say a word. I just sit there, hands in my lap, and look back at Geneva. This time I don't look away. She sees me looking, and for a second, just one, Her smile falters. It all unraveled in the space between a toast and the carving of the roast. 1 second, Delaney was smiling at a story Uncle Ray was telling about his high school baseball days. The next, she stiffened in her chair, her expression twisting, not quite in pain, but confusion. Then came the sharp intake of breath. Her hand fluttered to her abdomen. And then, just like that, she stood up, said something about feeling lightheaded, and started for the hallway. She didn't make it. The sound her body made when it hit the hardwood was a crack followed by silence. Everyone at the table froze. Forks hovered mid-air. Geneva was the first to move, her chair scraping against the floor in a shriek. "Delaney?" Her voice pitched higher than I'd ever heard it. "Baby?" I stood, but my legs didn't feel like they belonged to me. I kept my eyes on the glass Delaney had been drinking from, the one Geneva handed to me. I hadn't touched mine. She had. The room descended into chaos. Aunt Carla let out a scream, someone knocked over a wine glass, and Geneva was suddenly on her knees beside Delaney, cradling her head. "Call an ambulance!" someone yelled, maybe Aunt Trish. Geneva's face crumpled with worry, her hand smoothing Delaney's hair. "She's allergic to shellfish," she called out, voice trembling, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "She must have eaten something." Shellfish? We hadn't had any, not tonight. Geneva was lying, and lying well. Paramedics arrived fast. Geneva ushered them through like she'd rehearsed it. When they loaded Delaney onto the stretcher, Geneva didn't hesitate to climb in after her. She looked back at the group and said, "Please, everyone, stay. There's no need to turn this into more than it is." The front door shut behind them, and the room suddenly felt too big for the number of people in it. People murmured, whispers behind napkins, glasses refilled just to have something to do with their hands. I stayed near the table, my skin prickling under the weight of a dozen eyes that didn't quite know what they'd just seen, or maybe didn't want to admit it. As the chatter shifted from concern to speculation, I moved quietly to Delaney's place. Her glass was still there, maybe a quarter full. The light caught the rim just enough to show a faint residue, not something wine would leave behind. I grabbed a napkin from my lap, wrapped the glass discreetly, and slipped it into my purse. It clinked softly against my phone. No one seemed to notice. A catering staff member, mid-20s, dark ponytail, kind eyes, paused beside me. "You okay, ma'am?" I nodded. "Just worried, that's all." It was a lie I'd practiced over the years, the kind that lets you blend in without inviting more questions. She offered a soft smile and moved on to refill water glasses like nothing had happened, like Geneva hadn't possibly tried to poison her own stepdaughter, or maybe her own daughter. I stayed until most of the guests filtered out. Geneva's house looked more like a stage now, the aftermath of a scene that hadn't been in the script. The scent of citrus candles still lingered under the tension. Once I got home, I placed the wrapped glass on my kitchen counter, next to the fruit bowl I always meant to refill, but never did. I stared at it. Delaney had always been Geneva's pride. Polished, obedient, perfect posture. I was the smudge Geneva never could wipe clean from the mirror. If she had done what I thought she had to be sure. No assumptions, no speculation. I texted a friend from college, now working in a toxicology lab, and asked if we could talk the next day. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even sit down. I just opened my laptop and created a folder. I labeled it Geneva Hoyt Evidence. Then I clicked open a blank document and titled it, If Something Happens to Me. Morning sunlight spilled through the half-closed blinds, casting long stripes across my living room floor. I hadn't really slept, just hovered between dreams and watchfulness, the kind of night where your mind loops the same questions and never settles. The ping of a notification broke the stillness. I reached for my phone and saw Geneva's name, tagged me in a post. My stomach clenched before I even opened it. A photo from last night's dinner, the table glowing with candlelight, smiles frozen mid-laugh. A caption underneath read, "So proud of my girls, Delaney and Ingrid Holt." Holt. It wasn't even a new mistake, just the same persistent rewriting of my name. My name isn't Holt, never has been, it's Hoyt. But Geneva's little edits always made their way into place cards, email headers, photo captions, quiet deletions of who I was, every time dressed as a typo. I stood up and walked over to the counter where last night's glass still sat, untouched. Geneva was careful with the big things, charm, status, reputation, but it was the small needling gestures that left the deepest bruises. My phone buzzed again, a message from Rory. "You might want to see this, sent to the planning group last week." Attached was a forwarded email. Geneva's assistant had written, "Ingrid won't need to speak, she tends to get flustered. Better to focus the spotlight on Delaney. She's more polished." Polished. That word again. It was always Delaney who sparkled, and me who dulled the room. Never mind the fact that I had a solo show opening next month. Geneva didn't care about art, unless it could be framed inside her version of family perfection. I scrolled down and saw another line. "If Ingrid asks, say there wasn't enough time in the program." I sat still for a moment, letting the bitterness rise, then settle. No, I wasn't going to scream or send some half-baked reply. I saved the email to my new folder, added it to the growing pile. Then I walked over to the side table near the front door, where I'd tossed my clutch the night before. Inside was the place card I'd taken home, half out of pettiness, half out of habit. Sure enough, Ingrid Holt in curly gold script. I laid it flat next to the email on my desk. 2 pieces of evidence, nothing explosive, but they were threads. And Geneva's threads, when pulled, always led somewhere. Over the next hour, I scoured my email history. There were at least 6 messages in the past 3 years where my name had been altered or left out entirely. Event announcements, invitations, even a church bulletin where I was listed as a family guest. Not a daughter, not a part of anything. A guest. I opened a new document, titled it Pattern of Omission. One by one, I began to catalog everything. Menu cards, screenshots, photos from family events where I'd been cropped out or relegated to the background. I even found a voice memo I'd recorded months ago from a phone call with Geneva. Her voice sweet, practiced, introducing Delaney to a neighbor on speakerphone while brushing me off as the artistic one, still figuring herself out. It wasn't just about forgetting. It was about erasing, quietly, over time. There's a cruelty to being made invisible. It's not loud. It doesn't hit like a slap. It's more like erosion, slow, constant, and harder to prove. I saved the file, then leaned back in my chair. This wasn't just about a glass of juice anymore, or a dinner gone wrong. Geneva had spent years shaping a version of our family that didn't include me. Not really. I was an accessory to Delaney's glow, a buffer between Geneva and any narrative that didn't serve her. And now, with Delaney in a hospital bed and Geneva spinning stories, I knew one thing for sure. If I didn't speak, no one would. A new message lit up my phone, from Rory again. "You ever wonder what happened to Asher?" My fingers hovered over the screen. Asher, a name I hadn't heard in almost a decade. I didn't reply to Rory's message right away. I stared at it while the cursor blinked on my open document. If something happens to me. The timing of that name felt too pointed, like the universe nudging me with a cold elbow. 2 days passed in a blur of research, silence, and suspicion. I poured myself into cleaning out my small gallery space. It wasn't open yet, still smelled like fresh paint and unboxed hopes, but being there gave me clarity. Brick walls, honest floors, no pretense. I was sweeping near the back entrance when my phone buzzed. A text from an old contact at a national design magazine. We'd talked once about a feature if my gallery ever took off. "Hey, hope you're well. Bit surprised to see your partner pitching your exhibit last night at Geneva's dinner." I stopped mid-sweep. My partner? I hadn't introduced anyone as a partner. I hadn't even publicly shared the concept yet, not outside of private sketches and one-on-one conversations. Only a handful of people knew, and I could count every single one of them on one hand. Geneva had no business touching any of it. I texted back immediately. "Who exactly pitched it?" She replied with a name, someone I had briefly consulted with months ago. A man I trusted just enough to outline the concept, nothing more. Geneva must have reached out to him behind my back, or worse, brought him to the dinner under the illusion that it was some kind of joint venture. I leaned against the edge of a half-built display table, My legs felt like they couldn't hold up the weight of this new betrayal. It wasn't just the juice, wasn't just my name. Now it was my work, my career. The ringing in my ears hadn't settled before Rory's name flashed across my phone again. You free this afternoon? Need to talk. Really. We met at a quiet coffee shop near my building. He looked different, older than I remembered, though it had only been a couple of months since we'd last run into each other at Delaney's art show. He stirred his iced coffee, staring at the table like it might explain how we got here. Then he looked up. You ever think about why Asher really left? He asked. I froze. It had been almost 9 years since Asher ended things. One minute we were planning a life, the next I was standing alone in my apartment, rereading his last message like it held a hidden code. She told him you were unstable, Rory continued, his voice hushed. Geneva showed him old journals, the ones you kept after your dad died, said you were spiraling, said he'd be doing you a favor by stepping away before it got worse. The air between us shifted. That's not, I started, but he raised a hand gently. I know, he said. I didn't believe it then, not really. But I didn't push either, and I should have. I sat back, blinking fast. The breakup hadn't made sense even then. Asher had vanished with no real explanation, like he was following a script written by someone else. Someone persuasive, someone like Geneva. And the journals? I asked. Rory nodded. She had scanned copies, forwarded them, framed it like you were emotionally volatile, said she just wanted to protect him from getting too entangled. For a long moment I said nothing, just watched people come and go outside the window, a mother guiding her toddler across the sidewalk, a man in a suit adjusting his tie in his reflection, all of them existing in lives that felt unmanipulated. Can you get me proof? I finally asked. Rory didn't flinch. I can try. When I got back home, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I sat down at my desk, opened my evidence folder, and created a new tab. Relationships sabotaged. I uploaded everything I had. Emails, screenshots, names. This wasn't just emotional interference. It was systemic. It was strategic. Geneva had spun webs across every part of my life, who I dated, who I worked with, how people saw me. All while smiling, serving hors d'oeuvres, and correcting my name. That night, I opened my old Dropbox archive. I hadn't looked at it in years. Backups from college, photos from my first gallery show, journal entries, receipts, voice notes. And there, buried in a subfolder I barely remembered creating, was a PDF file. It was titled, Letter to Asher Draft. I clicked it open. The words I read made my stomach churn. I didn't sleep much after opening that file. I couldn't. I read and reread every word of that letter I had written, but never sent. An outpouring of pain, confusion, love, all filtered through the lens of a 23-year-old trying to make sense of a disappearing man and an ever-present mother. The next morning, my eyes burned, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. That letter made one thing abundantly clear. Geneva had always known how to weaponize perception. She'd made me look unstable, fragile, difficult to love. But I wasn't any of those things. Not really. I had been grieving, and she had turned that into ammunition. By noon, I was sitting cross-legged on the floor of my apartment, going through a flash drive labeled Backup Geneva B-Day 2019. I had asked for it months ago under the pretense of needing footage for a collage project I never started. At the time, Geneva was all too happy to hand it over. Her vanity loved the idea of being documented. I loaded the files, scanning through hours of smiling faces, champagne toasts, and choreographed speeches. It wasn't until I fast-forwarded to just before dessert that I saw something that froze me. Geneva was in the kitchen alone. She opened a drawer, removed a tiny vial, barely larger than a lipstick, and tipped a few clear drops into a glass on the counter. Her movements were calm, casual, like she'd done it before. She turned, placed the glass on a silver tray, and handed it to one of the servers. I paused the video. I knew that room. I knew that tray. That was the same dinner Delaney had ended up in the ER with anaphylactic shock. Geneva had written it off as bad shellfish, but Delaney never even touched the shrimp. The vial, the glass. It lined up too neatly. I copied the clip, saved it in 3 separate locations, then emailed one copy to myself with the subject line, Insurance, do not delete. Around 3 p.m., my phone lit up again. Rory. He'd found something. "I'm forwarding you a voice note," he said over the phone. "It's not recent, but it's revealing." I played it on speaker, sitting at my desk. Geneva's voice was unmistakable, rich, syrupy, and condescending all at once. "She always plays the victim," she said. "That girl could trip on a sidewalk crack and call it psychological abuse." I didn't react, not visibly. But inside, something snapped into place. The years of being told I was too sensitive, too reactive, too complicated. It had never been my issue. It had been hers. Projection, pure and poisonous. I called Rory back. "Thank you," I said. "I'm not done, but this helps." He hesitated. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm finally clear." An hour later, I was standing on Geneva's front porch. I hadn't planned it. I hadn't texted ahead. I just got in my car, USB drive in hand, and drove across town like muscle memory had taken over. The gates were open. The front door wasn't locked. That alone said everything. Geneva didn't believe she had anything to hide. Or maybe she believed no one would dare confront her. She opened the door with that same flawless smile, pearls strung around her neck like a noose of her own choosing. "Well," she said, voice light, "if it isn't my elusive artist daughter." I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. She didn't stop me. In the kitchen, I set the USB stick down on the marble counter. "Watch it," I said, keeping my voice even. "Then tell me again how you've done nothing wrong." She didn't look at the drive, just crossed her arms and tilted her head. "You'll have to be more specific, Ingrid. I've done a lot of things. I saw what you did at the party, the vial, the drink, the recording from Rory." She blinked slowly, then smiled again. "And what exactly do you plan to do with that? Post it online? Send it to the family? Come now, sweetheart. No one listens to the ones who cry wolf." I stepped closer, meeting her eyes. "You've spent your life grooming the narrative, controlling the lighting in every room. But here's the thing, Geneva. You don't own the truth, and you sure as hell don't own me." She let out a short, sharp laugh. "You think people will side with you? The girl who never finished college? The girl who can't hold a relationship? You're a painting with too many brushstrokes, confused and forgettable." I didn't blink. "You've mistaken quiet for weak," I said, low and measured. "That's your mistake, not mine." She didn't respond, just stood there, expression unreadable. I picked up my bag, turned to leave. She didn't say another word, but her eyes followed me all the way to the door. I drove home from Geneva's in the kind of silence that doesn't calm, it sears. Not the kind where you think clearly, but the kind where your thoughts form a gridlock in your chest, and the only thing louder than your heart is memory. I didn't take the freeway. I took back roads through the historic district, past houses with white columns and gas lanterns flickering beside polished brass numbers. It helped, somehow, to see order outside when everything inside me was chaos. When I got home, I tossed my keys into the bowl by the door and stared at the envelope still in my bag. The letter I'd printed, unsigned, unread by anyone but me. I will not be erased. It sat on my desk like a promise. The next morning, I woke before the alarm. I didn't shower, didn't eat. I dressed in dark jeans and a blouse Geneva once called unflattering. It felt appropriate. Then I drove across town to the courthouse. I'd called ahead and requested access to estate records. A clerk named Janine led me down to the archive basement, walls of metal drawers and the faint scent of paper older than I was. She handed me a slim folder. "This is the one used in probate court," she said, and left me alone. Inside were signatures, stamps, legal phrasing. Everything appeared polished, Geneva's specialty. But then I spotted the date. 2 weeks before my father died from what Geneva called a slip on the deck. In this version, Delaney inherited the lake house. Geneva retained control over the trust. My name was there, buried under sentimental items. A vague catch-all. My throat went dry. I returned to the counter. "I need to see earlier versions," I told Janine. She hesitated, then led me to a different drawer. Unofficial filings, preliminary drafts. One of them had my father's signature. His real signature. Not that shaky one on the final will. That document was different. Entirely different. My name appeared next to the lake house. The savings account my dad always joked was, for Ingrid someday. The trust didn't list Geneva at all. There was no mistake. The will had been rewritten, strategically, quietly. By the time I returned to my car, my palms were sweaty, and my pulse refused to calm. I sat for a full 5 minutes with the door open, letting air touch my skin. It wasn't just grief they'd manipulated. It was paperwork, systems, narratives sealed in courts and closets. I drove home in a daze, but I wasn't done. I made coffee, kicked off my shoes, and returned to the stack of files on my desk. A folder labeled medical had been growing. Bits and pieces Rory had helped me find, old emails, appointment slips. I added the next puzzle piece that day. A psychological evaluation, submitted as part of the probate defense, signed by Dr. Ellen Coates, a woman I only vaguely remembered. Geneva's friend. She'd evaluated me when I was 15, after I'd refused to speak to Geneva for 2 weeks straight. Back then, I thought it was standard. Now I knew better. The report claimed I had impulse regulation issues, emotional instability, and was potentially self-harming. I had no idea this document existed until that moment, but it had been used to justify removing me from financial responsibility. My own father had trusted Geneva to handle the paperwork. I pressed my thumb against the edge of the report. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat very still, remembering how I'd overheard Geneva that same year whispering into the phone, "She's not ready for any kind of pressure. She folds like paper." Back then, I thought she was worried. Now I saw it clearly. That evening, I wrote her a letter. Just one line, no rant, no threat. "I've seen the will. I've seen the diagnosis. I will not be erased." I didn't send it. I printed it and slid it beneath the evidence binder. I was no longer trying to understand her. I was preparing to hold her accountable. Around 9:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Delaney. Just 2 words. "What the hell?" I stared at Delaney's message on my screen for a few long seconds. "What the hell?" was vague, but the second one followed immediately after. I broke out again. Same rash, same spots. What is happening to me? My fingers tightened around my phone as I read it. Something heavy lodged in my chest. I asked what she'd eaten. Her answer came back almost instantly. "Nothing new, except one of those bars Mom dropped off. The ones with the blue ribbon." My stomach dropped. I had a matching bar in my fridge, still unopened. I walked across the apartment, opened the fridge door, and took it out. Geneva's handwriting still on the tag. "Just a little something to keep your strength up." I peeled back the wrapper, broke a piece off, and sniffed. It smelled faintly of almond. Delaney is allergic. Highly, hospital-level allergic. Geneva knows that. She's known since Delaney was 5 and swelled up after a slice of cake at a wedding. I called Delaney immediately. Her voice was strained. My lips tingled after the first bite. Then the itching started. I thought I was going crazy. "I'm coming to get you," I told her. It took me 12 minutes to reach her apartment. She was already waiting on the sidewalk, skin blotchy, eyes wide. I didn't ask more questions. I drove straight to urgent care. Inside the clinic, the fluorescent lights hummed above us as the nurse took her vitals. The physician on duty confirmed it. Mild anaphylactic reaction. Her throat hadn't closed, but it was close. One more bite could have tipped her over the edge. Delaney looked at me while they prepped an injection. "You don't think she meant to—" She stopped, shaking her head. "No, I mean, come on, that's crazy." I didn't answer. I just sat beside her, gripping the arms of the chair too tightly. I drove her home after they cleared her. She didn't ask me to stay, and I didn't offer. We both needed space to think. Or maybe to unthink everything that had just been confirmed. Back at my apartment, I laid the protein bar, half broken, next to the growing pile of evidence. I didn't even sit down before I opened my laptop. The next folder I needed to revisit wasn't in my hard drive. It was still backed up in the cloud, my father's coroner file. Years ago, Geneva insisted on keeping things private. We had a small, closed-casket funeral. She called it an accident, a simple fall, a tragic mistake, but I remember thinking something didn't sit right. I searched through the Dropbox archive. It took some time, years of files, photos, scans, but I finally found it. The autopsy. At first glance, nothing jumped out, but on the second page, under toxicology, I saw it. trace amounts of benzodiazepines, unprescribed. On page 4, there were notes, bruises along the ribcage and neck, inconsistent with stare trauma. One word was underlined in pen, maybe by a coroner, maybe not, restraint. I felt cold. It wasn't just about me anymore, or Delaney. He died under suspicion. He died drugged, and Geneva buried him, with a funeral and a tray of shrimp cocktail. My father trusted her, and she used that trust the same way she used everything else in her life, as leverage. I stood up and walked toward the mirror in my hallway. For a long time I'd seen myself through her eyes, the difficult daughter, the unstable one, the problem child. But she didn't just try to erase me, she erased him too. This was no longer a family matter. This was something else entirely. I didn't sleep that night. I booked a meeting room first thing the next morning. One of those public library spaces with long tables and bad lighting. It didn't matter. I just needed it to hold people. I invited everyone, all of them. It was time. The morning sun was already climbing when I slid the last flash drive into its case. I hadn't slept, but my nerves weren't frayed. They were sharp, focused. Every click of the mouse, every label I printed, every file I copied, it all carried intention. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about resolution. I reserved a private lounge at the small hotel off Abercorn Street. Neutral space, enough chairs, a wall for projection, decent parking. I didn't want luxury. I wanted quiet accountability. The email subject line read, playback. Nothing else. I sent it to Geneva, to Delaney, Rory, of course, Owen and his wife. Geneva had poisoned their ears with gossip for years. A couple of extended relatives I hadn't spoken to since the funeral. Some would come out of curiosity. Some wouldn't come at all. I didn't care. By noon, the room was ready. I set out bottled water, paper cups, and a tray of cookies I didn't expect anyone to touch. My laptop was hooked up to the projector, muted, ready. A single USB sat next to it, labeled in plain block text. Evidence. They trickled in slowly. Delaney was first, pale and quiet. She sat near the back, hands wrapped around her phone like it might shield her. Rory gave me a small nod as he entered. Owen didn't look at me. Geneva was last, heels clicking across tile like nothing was wrong. She wore pearls, of course. Interesting choice of venue, she said, glancing around the room. I needed something neutral, I replied. Neutral? Sounds like you're planning a war. I didn't answer. I just tapped the spacebar on my laptop and dimmed the lights. First, the footage, Geneva at the dinner, smiling, laughing, her hand hovering over a glass. The vial, barely visible, tilted over the rim. The clip looped once. Silence. Next came the audio Rory had captured. Geneva's voice, crystal clear. She always plays the victim. That girl could trip on air and call it abuse. I felt Delaney stiffen behind me. Then the still frames from the autopsy report. The bruises, the drug listing, the sealed date. Finally, a clip of Geneva on the phone with someone we didn't name, yelling, "She wasn't supposed to drink it!" I turned the lights back on. Geneva stood slowly. "This is slander," she said, her voice tight. "It's not slander if it's true," I answered. "Everyone here knows how you dramatize things, Ingrid. You've always needed an audience, always looking for someone to blame. Your father babied you. Your teachers gave you passes. Now what? You think this little movie makes you a martyr?" She was unraveling. Her voice lost that usual glaze. The control slipped like sweat off a porcelain cup. No one said a word. Not Owen, not his wife, not even Delaney. Rory stood, stepped forward, and handed me a small envelope. I took it without looking, my eyes never leaving Geneva. "Done?" she snapped. "I'm done playing quiet." That's when the two men at the back of the room moved forward. "Geneva Myers," the taller one said. "You're under arrest for attempted poisoning and obstruction of probate investigation. Please stand and place your hands in front of you." Geneva's expression didn't shift. Not right away. Then, for the first time, her eyes darted to Delaney, who looked away. They cuffed her gently, almost too politely. "This is ridiculous," Geneva muttered. "I raised her. I gave her everything. She was nothing without me." I packed my laptop without responding. Just as they led Geneva out, she turned her head and hissed, "You'll regret this." "No," I said softly. I already regret staying silent this long. The door closed behind her. The room didn't erupt. No one clapped. It wasn't that kind of ending. Rory handed me a second flash drive. "One more backup," he said, "just in case." Delaney stayed in her chair a while, unmoving. I didn't expect a hug. I didn't need one. But when she finally stood, she gave me the faintest nod. A thank you that didn't need words. As people began filtering out, no one spoke to me directly. Not Owen, not the cousins. But they didn't defend her either. That was enough for now. Later that evening, I returned home, poured a glass of wine, sat on the couch and let the quiet in. The phone sat beside me, still and silent. I waited. The next morning, the sun slipped through my apartment blinds, casting long rectangles across the floor. I hadn't moved much through the night. My glass of wine from the evening before still sat on the coffee table, untouched. My phone buzzed at 6:42 a.m., a voicemail, no caller ID. I pressed play. It was Asher. His voice was quieter than I remembered, like he was speaking from a hallway he didn't want anyone else to overhear. I read the article. I saw the footage. "Ingrid, I need to tell you something." There was a pause long enough to make me think the message had ended. "You weren't wrong back then. You weren't unstable. Geneva sent me documents, your journals, a psychologist's letter, something about medication. She said you were spiraling. She made it seem like I was helping you by walking away." He exhaled. "I didn't know better, but I should have. I'm sorry. I hope you found peace." Then nothing, just silence. The line cut. I didn't cry. I didn't text him back. I didn't block him either. I just sat there, letting that truth wash over me. For years I'd folded that relationship into the my fault drawer. Now I saw it for what it was. Something intercepted, rewritten, like everything else. Later that week, the local news ran a short segment. Savannah socialite charged with tampering, fraud, and suspected manslaughter. They didn't say Geneva's name right away, but the anchor's tone said enough. Delaney gave her testimony, calm, steady. She didn't look at the camera once. Rory verified the recordings. Owen declined to comment. The cousins disappeared back into their gated neighborhoods, muttering about bad blood and family drama. I received several interview requests, morning shows, podcast features, a streaming docuseries pitch. I turned them all down. I wasn't interested in reliving what I'd survived for someone else's content calendar. Instead, I focused on the gallery, a restored brick building down on Bay Street, just a block from the Riverwalk. It smelled like fresh paint and sawdust and potential. My name was etched on the glass door in clean serif letters. Ingrid Hoyt. No misspellings, no apologies, no parentheses. Opening night came without fanfare. A few local artists, some students. My old painting professor sent flowers and a note. "You made something beautiful out of something brutal. That's the job." I taped it inside my supply cabinet. One afternoon, after the last visitor left, I locked up and took a walk across town. The cemetery wasn't far. The sky was overcast, and the air smelled like salt and stone. I found my father's headstone. The grass was trimmed. The flowers Delaney had left last month were dried and pale. I crouched, brushed away a few fallen leaves, and pulled a photo from my coat pocket. It was from the gallery's opening. I was standing beside one of my pieces, a sprawling canvas of deep, rust-red brushwork. Behind me, a small crowd smiled for the camera. Rory, a few artists, one of the neighbors who always brought peach pie to the market. I set the photo gently against the base of the stone. "You saw something in me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, even when no one else did. The breeze shifted. I stayed a moment longer, not expecting answers, just grounding myself in what was real. As I walked away, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious, but I felt free from needing Geneva's approval, free from rewriting myself to fit someone else's narrative, free from pretending the past didn't matter, because it did. But I got to decide what to carry forward and what to leave buried. Back at the studio, I opened the windows, let the light in, picked up my brush, and turned to the blank canvas waiting by the easel, not to escape the story, but to finish it my way. Sometimes, the loudest kind of strength is the kind no one sees. It's not about slamming doors or raising your voice. It's about standing your ground when no one believes your story. And it's about choosing healing, even when revenge seems easier. Looking back, I don't think I needed to win. I just needed the truth to stop being buried. And I needed to stop shrinking in rooms where I was meant to stand tall. If you've ever felt unseen in your own family, or doubted your instincts because someone made you feel too sensitive, I want you to hear this clearly. You're not imagining it. You're not broken, and it's not too late to rewrite the story they tried to assign you. So let me ask you this. Have you ever had to fight just to be believed, to be heard? I'd love to know your story. Share your thoughts in the comments. Whether you're watching from Oregon or Oklahoma, let me know where you're tuning in from. If this video spoke to you, type 1 in the comments so I know it reached your heart. And if it didn't, tell me why. I want to hear all sides. And hey, if you want more real stories like this one, stories that make you feel something, maybe help you see your own life a little clearer, don't forget to subscribe. Just hit that subscribe button and stay with me. More stories are coming your way. Until next time, speak up, stand firm, and don't let anyone write your legacy but you.